Hello, this is Henry Devon. It's good to see you all again. This particular topic this week was of particular interest to me because about four and a half or four or so years ago, David Barton, associate of Glenn Beck's, sort of an amateur historian, a history collector, he's based here in Texas. He released a book called The Jefferson Lies. And at the time, I had a podcast in which I was discussing history and interviewing history authors, and I had the opportunity to be able to interview David Barton and talk to him about his book. The book is it's short and it's simple, and it addresses some of the myths that developed over the last couple of hundred years regarding Thomas Jefferson. Now, I tend to be a bit skeptical of what I call wooden teeth historians. These are the sorts of people that have written over the years, just to kind of, I suppose, to show that our founding fathers or our leaders were human, right? And so they're looking for anything and everything that really shows off their human side. That it was almost that the revolution and everything that led up to it, the founding fathers and their moral upstandingness were just a little too good to be true. So I was curious about the book, and I interviewed David Barton about it, and I read it, of course, and I'm providing you all a link so that you can link to the podcast with some instructions below. There was some response to the podcast, notably from a fellow by the name of Warren Throckmorton, who had actually written an entire book to completely dispel, in an attempt to dispel David Barton's thesis, right? And while I admire Professor Throckmorton's efforts, I think it was just a little too nuanced, and he focused very heavily on Jefferson's political career and his political statements, things that he said while he was president or holding office. And as we all know, your political persona and your spiritual persona, especially with our world leaders, with our American leaders, can often appear two-faced. I think that Throckmorton focused a little too much on those details and didn't focus enough on Jefferson's actual philosophies. But regarding the Sally Hemings affair, one of my favorite and go-to biographies for Thomas Jefferson is the Willard Stern Randall Thomas Jefferson A Life book, and this was released in 1993. And he had this to say about the Sally Hemings affair. He says, "Some writers have tried to paint Sally Hemings as the concubine of a lonely, lovesick Jefferson. In Thomas Jefferson, An Intimate History, the late Fawn M. Brodie suggested that when Jefferson traveled through France and Germany and 8 times described soil as mulatto in his 25 sheets of notes, he was not referring, as he labeled the appropriate column of his charts, to yellowish soil in the hills and valleys he traveled through, but was really thinking of the contours of Sally's body. And when he was taking notes on a new kind of moldboard plow that he invented shortly after the journey, he was really thinking of plowing the fertile Sally as soon as he returned to Paris. But mulatto is a precise term describing yellowish-brown soil. And when Jefferson used the term mulatto to describe soil during his French travels, Sally was still on a ship with Polly, his daughter, accompanying her to France. If he had ever noticed her or remembered her at all, Sally had been only 10 years old when Jefferson last visited Monticello hurriedly to pack James Hemings off to France with him. She was only 8 when Jefferson had last resided at Monticello, and he was mourning his wife's death. Unless Brodie was suggesting that Jefferson consoled himself by having an affair with an 8-year-old child, the whole chain of suppositions is preposterous. So, once again, my summation is that Jefferson lived a long life. He had lots of opinions. He changed his mind philosophically from time to time, but nonetheless, other people, even the Adamses, thought he was an upstanding individual. So, I tend to take the side of, even though there's lots of controversy about the accuracy of some of David Barton's writing, I think the principle behind David Barton's book is I think it's still sound.